Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today we're going to take a look at your Game Week 10 questions that you have put to me on the various social media platforms, whether it's in YouTube comments, on Instagram comments, or Twitter, etc. Right, so this is a new series that I will be launching every week. I hope that this video will be useful and it gives me a platform to just speak about topics in general, which is a video that I don't really have right now. So I hope this video is useful for you guys as well. If you guys do enjoy it, and if you have feedback for me as well, please do drop it in the comments down below. I hope I will be able to improve this as we go along as well. Alright, so do subscribe, do like, and let's jump into the first question. So the first question is regarding hits. Right, so is a -4 or a -12 worth it this game week to bring in players? I've already wildcarded. So I'll start off by saying that hits are not inherently bad. I don't mind the idea of taking hits, especially if it's with a long-term view. And I don't love taking hits, but sometimes I do feel it's necessary, right? Because they shape your team better and they address the issues now that maybe weren't issues before, right? So obviously this is very team dependent, but what I would say, it really depends on who you're taking out and who you're bringing in. Because this game week in particular, I remember before the Spurs game, a lot of people were planning to remove Son potentially or Maddison potentially for a hit to bring Saka in as well. So you will have to think whether that is worth it or not, and whether that move can be delayed, because in isolation after the Spurs game, it seems as if some people are now more keen to keep your Spurs players as well. So I will weigh up the pros and cons, and ultimately when you are weighing up whether a hit is worth it or not, you just need the players that you bring in, right, versus the players that you are removing. You need them to score more, or at least 4 more points if you're taking a -4 hit over the next couple of game weeks. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. And with regards to wildcarding, what I would say is that just because you've wildcarded does not mean you can't take hits anymore. FPL is a dynamic game, right? Now the information that you have may be different, right? Maybe injuries pop up or players change the particular positions that they're playing, and as a result of that, they no longer become good FPL options. So what I would say is, reacting to this information, taking hits to address your team, I don't mind it at all. And if that requires you to take a -4, a -8 whatsoever, then go ahead. But I will think twice, especially about selling Spurs assets this game week. So once again, it seems obvious enough, but do consider who you are removing and who you're bringing in, and weigh the pros and cons of that before deciding whether the hit is worth it or not. So the next question is a more popular one, and it's around selling Spurs assets. Who do we keep? Who do we sell? So Chandra on YouTube has asked, do you think Spurs with no midweek fixtures and players getting enough rest will be an advantage? Son, Maddison, Porro, who should we keep for future games? So I know in an ideal world, we would want to keep all our Spurs assets with the way that they're performing right now. Son, Maddison, really on form. Porro, very attacking, and they're keeping clean sheets now and then. The thing is, why this has crossed our mind is obviously because their fixtures moving forward aren't the best. They're not the worst, but they aren't the best. They do have some tough fixtures moving forward. And of course, this ties in with the fact that right now there are a couple of fixture swings for teams like Arsenal, teams like Aston Villa, teams like Brighton as well. So there are a lot of alternative options. West Ham not to mention as well. So once again, loads of other options in the midfield area, especially players like Saka, Bowen, Mitoma, Diaby, Adingra maybe. So all these options are coming up, and we're just thinking whether maybe we should sell our Spurs assets before this kind of tough run. But I feel like form does play a factor as well. And of course, I think before the Spurs game, before they won 2-0 and Son and Maddison hauled, I think a lot of us were more comfortable selling the Spurs assets because they provided routes to players like Saka and Bowen that maybe we can't afford previously, right? So, but now, of course, reacting to the new information and seeing that Spurs has won and how consistent they are, I think a lot of us are changing our minds and potentially wanting to keep them as well, right? So I think in general, what I would say is that I wouldn't sell Spurs assets this game week, especially for a hit. And if I were to rank the most dispensable asset out of Son, Maddison, and Porro, I think without a doubt it's Porro. But I think for you guys, what's more important is whether you sell Son or Maddison if you want to go to players like Saka or Bowen. And I would obviously rank Maddison as the player to sell first before you sell Son, simply because of the position that that they're playing. Right, Son is playing in the number 9 position. Maddison is playing a little bit deeper, not as deep as players like Bissouma, etc., but he is in the attacking midfield position. So furthest front is Son, and he will be the one scoring the goals. Granted, Maddison has other routes to points like set pieces, corners, etc. But I do feel like the position that Son is playing actually kind of justifies his price tag a little bit. He takes a lot more shots than Maddison, and of course he's on the end of chances, and scoring goals is more important than getting assists as well. So if I were to keep one, I would choose to keep Son. And of course, he is the more expensive one at 9.5 million. Maddison is at 8.1. So I feel like at this point in time, it may not be a choice for us on who we want to keep, depending on who we want to bring in as well. Because Son potentially, if we sell him, frees up loads of funds for other players like Saka, Bowen, etc. that we've already gone through. So I feel like if given a choice, I would obviously try to keep Son. Maddison, I feel like he's a little bit more dispensable. So next up is about Ollie Watkins, whether we sell Darwin Núñez or Alvarez to get him. So these are questions from Instagram. Is it worth switching from Alvarez to Ollie Watkins? Do we sell Núñez and buy Watkins or keep Núñez instead? So I think in isolation, what I would say is out of the three assets, Watkins, Alvarez, and Núñez, Watkins is definitely the best. I think we can all agree on this. He's more nailed, right? He's pretty much guaranteed a start. And of course, his fixtures are kind of the best moving forward as well. Now, Liverpool's fixtures are arguably quite good as well. But what I would say in comparing Ollie Watkins and Núñez is, of course, we're looking at a more nailed asset, one that's guaranteed to start versus Núñez, who is subject to some rotation, and Gakpo will be coming back soon as well. Jota, of course, is fit as well. So there are alternatives for Liverpool in the centre forward position. But for Aston Villa, there's definitely less of an alternative other than Ollie Watkins. I don't think they'll be starting Duran anytime soon. So, in that sense, Darwin Núñez to Ollie Watkins, I think is a slightly easier move to make. Alvarez to Ollie Watkins, I think is slightly harder, but I think I would lean towards doing the move as well. I would sell Alvarez to Ollie Watkins, but that would purely be a fixture play. I think Ollie Watkins' fixtures moving forward, especially Luton at home now this game week, is definitely a fixture that's super plumb for him. The next coming game weeks as well are really good, so it's not just a short-term move. Long-term, his fixtures are really good. His prospects are really good as well. And not to say that Alvarez doesn't score in the next coming games, but in isolation, I just feel like Ollie Watkins scores more than Alvarez. So if selling Alvarez is your route to get Ollie Watkins, and if you have to take hits, etc., to maybe get Ollie Watkins for your third striker, then I think I would be leaning towards selling Alvarez for Ollie Watkins. So short answer is to say Darwin Núñez or Alvarez to Ollie Watkins. Yes, I would make that move. So the next question is about James Ward-Prowse. Do we keep him or do we sell him? So I will remember a couple of game weeks ago when I wildcarded in game week 8, I myself brought James Ward-Prowse in thinking that he was quite attacking. He was playing in the attacking midfield positions for a couple of game weeks already. And then, of course, he got a couple of goals against Man City as well. You remember he scored. So 2 goals before game week 8 was how many he picked up. And, of course, he was picking up a couple of bonus points here and there as well, even if he didn't return. So his prospects were looking really good. And then all of a sudden, Souček has come into the team and played in the attacking midfield position instead, right? James Ward-Prowse has kind of dropped a little bit deeper now beside Alvarez as a defensive midfielder. And in that sense, obviously that's not what we want from an FPL asset. We don't really want to have the defensive midfielder in our positions, in our teams. And of course, granted that James Ward-Prowse does have other routes to points. He's on set pieces, all the set pieces basically, and he has a really good free kick in him. But I think him playing in the defensive midfield position definitely changes the whole aspect of him being an FPL asset. So just to put this context into numbers, if we compare from game week 2 to game week 5, he actually accumulated 1.52 expected goals. And from game week 6 to game week 9, which is the last 3 to 4 game weeks, he's only accumulated 0.25. So that's kind of a massive drop-off as well. 1.52 versus 0.25. So that's an incredible drop-off. And it's obviously due to the position that he's playing right now as a defensive midfielder. So what I would say is that I think he's most definitely a sell. I wouldn't say he's an urgent sell. If you have to take a hit to sell him, I don't think I would. But what I would say is that there are a lot of other options in general right now that are much better than James Ward-Prowse. So he's a sell for me, and in my own team, I'm probably going to sell him this week as well. So the next question is about Douglas Luiz. Is he an FPL option? Now, I didn't expect to receive so many questions about Douglas Luiz this game week. And I do understand the hype slightly. He is the highest scoring midfielder, below 6 million right now in the game. He has scored 49 points this season so far, right? And he's just hauled against West Ham as well. 2 goals, a penalty, and of course a shot from outside the box. But I do feel like we're getting a little bit too hyped up about Douglas Luiz right now. And it does feel a little bit knee-jerky, and for a couple of reasons. So if we take a step back, firstly, his data isn't as good as it seems, right? So he's gotten 5 goals this season, 3 of which came from penalties. So if we consider the 2 other goals he scored from open play, they actually came from a non-penalty expected goal involvement of 0.67. So that is really, really low. And it's a massive overperformance from him right now to even get those to even get those goals from open play, basically. So I don't think he'll be able to keep this up. And when the penalties, when he doesn't get penalties, I doubt he will keep up this attacking return rate as well. And at 5.5 million, I actually feel like there are a lot more viable options that we can go for. Gordon at 0.1 million more expensive, I feel is a more attacking asset that can sustain his returns moving forward as well. So I do feel like we are getting a little bit too hyped up about Douglas Luiz. And not to mention as well, he is on 4 yellow cards. So that is something that does play into our minds as well, because 1 more yellow card and he will be suspended. That's not great. And if we are buying Douglas Luiz, we would want to start him every single game week. So it will be quite annoying to get that 5th yellow as well. So that also plays into our minds. But what I will say also is that from the eye test perspective, I do get the appeal that he has been playing a little bit more of an attacking role. But once again, the numbers put me off. And if that's not enough, then the yellow card situation also rules him out as an option for me. So the next question is from Ricky, who's a YouTube member, and he's asked about Brighton Assets. So do we have to get them? What do we do with Brighton Assets? They have good fixtures from game week 10 to game week 13, but they have been vulnerable in the last few games. So I'll kind of contextualize what I feel about them being vulnerable. I think in defense, they have always been vulnerable. The last few game weeks, they conceded goals, but they've been conceding goals the whole season already. Their defensive is actually in the bottom half of the league this season. So in terms of defensive assets, aside from Estupinian, who makes up for how poor they are in defense with his attacking threat, I don't think we look for other defensive options from Brighton. And of course, he is still injured. So we'll wait to see what De Zerbi says. So defensive options are out of the window. And in terms of attacking assets, I think there are 2 sides to it. There is an argument to avoid them because they are quite prone to rotation. We've seen that their involvement in Europe has seen quite some rotation for their attackers. And of course, Mitoma himself as well has seen some benchings as well. So there is case to avoid. But then again, I look at the case to buy these players, buy Brighton players, and I think that they are quite appealing in a couple of areas. So firstly, they're quite cheap, right? So the Brighton attackers, the most expensive one is Mitoma at 6.5. And Ansu Fati is at 6.5 as well, for those of us who want to consider Ansu Fati. But I think it goes downwards from there. So Ferguson is at 6 million, and Adingra thereafter is also at 5 million. There's João Pedro is pretty cheap as well. So because they are so cheap and they provide good value for an attack that is so strong like Brighton's one, right? Attackingly, I don't feel like they've dropped off. I think the last few game weeks, even though they had tough fixtures, attackingly they played pretty well as well. So I don't feel like they won't score in the next couple of game weeks with the fixtures that they have. I definitely back them to score. And then they're really cheap. So they act as enablers for us to afford players like, Saka. If you want to keep Son, maybe going for a Brighton attacker is your route to that 5th midfielder as well. So I think in terms of the attack, I really don't mind going for a Brighton attacker. And I actually am considering Adingra myself. So I will have a think about it before I actually buy him. But for the time being, it seems as if my thoughts about Brighton Assets is that I really don't mind him at all. And I would be looking to buy one this game week. So if I were to rank without any budget constraints, I would say Mitoma is the best one to own. I think we can all agree on this one. But beyond that, I think Adingra is a very, very good enabler at 5 million. And then my third option would be Evan Ferguson, because Welbeck is currently out. But the thing with Evan Ferguson is that sooner rather than later, he will be a transfer out when Welbeck comes back, because the rotation risk is too high. So I would say Mitoma is first and then Adingra, because Solly March is now out and it seems like that right wing spot is dangerous to lose. So for the other two options that I haven't mentioned, Ansu Fati and João Pedro, I just don't think they're options that we should consider right now. They're not really FPL options for me because of how prone they are to rotation. Even though João Pedro, I understand, is on penalties and Ansu Fati has been coming on to pick up a couple of goals, but I still wouldn't go for them. They haven't done enough for me this season to give me the confidence to buy them as assets. So what I would say is Mitoma, Adingra, and then Ferguson in that order. So there we go. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of this new series, and if you have other questions as well, let me know down in the comments below and I'll try to get to all of them. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Do like, do subscribe, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow in the team selection video. Bye bye.